Hello, Mohammed Ibrahim, Financial Inclusion Week 2022. This year, I want to talk about three groups and the four areas in this theme, inclusive growth in digital era. So, the question I really want to answer is, will fintech enable financial inclusion for the unbanked and the unbankable? And I guess what you probably want to know is who are those people, and I will explain who are they are. But first, I want to thank Yale and the Real Bank, who are saying they will make all Somalis financially included. But before we go any further, let me explain what financial inclusion is. Individuals and businesses have access to useful and affordable financial products and services that meet their needs, such as transactions, payments, savings, credit, and insurance, and all of those things are delivered in a responsible and sustainable way. That is one definition of financial inclusion, and that's from the Center for Financial Inclusion. But of course, there are many others, but we're not going to go into that academic discussion at the moment. Now, my area of interest today is really, and as a background, is who is not included. When we talk about financial exclusion or people who are not financially included, who are they? And I'm going to go through these three particular groups: the unbanked, underbanked, and unbankable. Now, normally in the literature, we know about the underbanked and unbanked, but I'm introducing the unbankable. And this is based on research I'm doing at the moment. But let me just very quickly explain who are the underbanked. Underbanked, as we all know, are people who normally have bank accounts, but they don't have all the banking facilities or all the financial services available to them. And unbanked are people who are not banked at all. They have no bank accounts. And they are very common. For example, in the case study I'm looking at now in Somalia, there are a lot of people who use mobile phones to transfer and receive money, but really they have no bank accounts. So they're unbanked, not underbanked. Underbanked, they already have bank accounts, but they're missing some of the financial services. But this time I'm introducing the unbankable. Again, it's a new phenomenon and it's very common now in the literature. There are a group, a segment of our society who are not unbankable, and they're very common in Somalia. Now, the photos you see seem to show one particular gender, many ladies, and there's a reason for that. And I'm not going to go into that discussion, but it seems most of those underbanked and unbankable seem to be ladies or women or that part of our society. Now, there are four areas I want to cover within those three categories, and I will start with remittance, or what we call hawala, and what that's doing in financial inclusion. Now, in summary, very briefly, remittance has helped financial inclusion because a lot of the people in the diaspora send money home, and hence they become either banked or underbanked, but nevertheless, they get into the financial inclusion side of things. And here I'm just showing a few papers and some research done in that area, but I'm not going to go through into the detail, but I will encourage you, if you're really interested in what remittance is doing in financial inclusion, to look at those studies that way back from 2015, and also the recently, as of a few months ago, the IMF working paper. So I would really encourage you to read that. And more or less, you'll agree with me that remittance, yes, is helping, it's enhancing financial inclusion. Now, the other group I want to mention is the mobile money industry. Here is an area that I'm actually researching for the last 2 years and maybe another year ahead. And this is a research I'm doing on mobile money, particularly in Somalia, because a lot of people know that in the literature, Somalia or the Somalis, we claim we're way ahead in terms of the use of mobile money, but does it really help financial inclusion? That's really what I'm interested in. And that research will come out hopefully in a year or so. But in the meantime, I can give you a glimpse or a hint. And I guess the jury is out, but my initial reaction is there's a lot more work to be done in the mobile money industry if it has to help financial inclusion in Somalia. And here again, I want to mention a couple of papers that are very authoritative. And does mobile money improve financial inclusion? Comes from the UNCDF, and I would really encourage you to read that if you really want to know more about how mobile money um, supports or enhances financial inclusion, especially in this case in Somalia. So we talked about remittance, and now we introduced mobile money. I want to continue on that theme. As we said, there are four areas I want to look. Cryptos coming to the scene lately, and apparently there's a lot of literature out there that claim that say cryptos or cryptocurrencies are also helping financial inclusion. Now, I don't know about particularly in Somalia, but in West Africa and other areas, that seems to be the case. And here I want to acknowledge um, Adriana Magdas, who's a specialist from the Center for Financial Inclusion, who wrote an amazing study in this. And very quickly, I just want to mention some of the ideas, what cryptos are, and how they help in financial inclusion. There's the idea about the libertarian exuberance quote, and I'll let you have a look at that paper. But what's happening here is there are a lot of people who are still not really sure cryptos in general or cryptocurrencies, let alone its reaction or action or involvement in the financial inclusion side of things. Now, there are a lot of things we can say about this, but I want to just mention some of these items. The reason a lot of people are not really comfortable with cryptos is about the regulation. In other words, who runs it, who owns it, how is it managed, and so on. Others worry about the consumer driver data privacy, the idea that it's irreversible. Once something goes wrong in cryptos, then you cannot fix it like normal money in banks and so on. Mainly in Somalia and other countries, there's also the knowledge gap and also a limited market. So all these things are combined together to me make me worry what cryptos can do as enhancing or a mechanism that will support or move financial inclusion forward. So I won't go into further details into this, but I really just want to mention that as a third item that I'm covering here. So far we covered remittance, mobile money, and I mentioned crypto currencies or cryptos and what it can do to financial inclusion. Now, this is a new area, and I really would like people to read or to pay attention to this because things are moving very fast towards this area, and I'm very optimistic that it might help. But initially, we need to think about all those problems or all those issues I just raised about the data privacy, the knowledge gap, the reversibility, and the limited market as well as the regulation that is an area that's not really properly regulated. So the fourth area I want to move to, which is kind of the cutting edge, I guess, or the bleeding edge, whichever word or phrase you want to use, is the CBDCs or central bank digital currencies and financial inclusion. Would you believe after all that we went through with the remittance and mobile money and cryptos, now there are people who are claiming CBDCs can also have an impact on financial inclusion. I guess it excites me. I like it. It's the kind of thing that, in terms of academia or my interest in technology, yes, it's the way forward. It's the way to go. But does it really help? Does it really enhance or has it got any impact on financial inclusion? I think that's too early to say. Why? Because the concept itself or the mechanism to make money programmable or without not going into the detail here, the central bank digital currency, basically what we're really saying is we will have money that's programmable that can be managed by the government or by the central bank. And to be honest, personally, maybe it's the way to go, especially for Somalia. Maybe maybe that's what we need to fix some of the problems we have. But it might be too early. So really, those are the four ideas I really want to share with you, based on those three other groups I said earlier about the underbanked, unbanked, and the unbankable, especially in Somalia. So hopefully, through those four areas I covered, maybe we will move forward and we might get financially included. But let me just add a couple of other items here. I mentioned the Real Bank and Yale, which are a bank and an app that's being used in Somalia, who are collaborating and trying to empower startups in a developing country like Somalia, and it will encourage and I hope it will help in terms of bringing some sanity in the government policies. In other words, how do we manage this whole sector, especially in Somalia, and as an extension, hopefully, in other African countries and developing countries. Now, the other thing I just want to mention very quickly is this idea about financial inclusion. It's not new. We've been around for a long time. In fact, there was an idea that said we really need to get universal financial services by 2020, only a few years, I guess, late, but I'm hopeful. I'm always optimistic, but I won't dwell on this. But the only three items I want to mention is it's really an area that's under researched, and we need to really use this as I guess, an opportunity to show it's actually a solution that's available that will enable the unbanked if it's done properly and under regulations. And I hope researchers and people who are in the policymakers area to pay a little more attention to this because financial inclusion is seen as a way of empowering people. In fact, the UN SGs SDGs, there are almost more than seven that talk about financial inclusion, and that's why really it's important that we need to look into this. Now, very quickly, I want to mention also as suggestions, what am I really bringing to the table? What am I suggesting is there's a few things that we can do, and these are the people who are involved: the ITU, the UBU, the World Bank, the IMF, the Better Than Cash, Alliance of Financial Inclusion, even GSMA, who are in telecoms, somehow, one way or another, are involved in financial inclusion. So my suggestion is the need for collaboration. I guess if all these groups, each one of them is trying to do something about financial inclusion, but everyone is doing their own thing, then I guess resources are not utilized properly, and perhaps that might be an area that we can look at. Now, I want to just stop here. I want to thank you all for your time and watching this, and I also want to acknowledge and thank Hamid from the Real Bank who gave me some ideas about this topic. So, as a wrap up, to conclude this whole discussion, it's financial inclusion, the way forward. The UN SDGs are there. Academics are writing about it. All these other groups are doing something one way or another. But at the end of the day, it's not really only the unbanked or the underbanked, but there are another category, the marginalized group, which we are calling the unbankable. No matter what we do, how do we get those people to even become underbanked, so let alone unbanked? And that's really where I want to stop. Now, as it happens, even me as a person who would consider that I'm banked and I have bank accounts or whatever, I could also become unbanked. As it happens, there's a real case where banks can close your bank accounts, and I could be in a classic case. I myself now I'm unbanked in a certain country where my bank account is closed. Let's say the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. Why? Because they have on de-risking policy. Is that fair or illegal or whatever it is? No, that's not the discussion at the moment. The discussion is really it's not only developing countries, it's not only Somalia or Benin or Burkina Faso or people who live in those countries who can become unbanked or underbanked or unbankable. You could be even living in Melbourne and become unbanked. Why? Because some bank decides to de-risk and you have no bank account. And nothing can the government or the ombudsman or anyone can do because the banks are just too powerful to fail. So I stopped there. I wanted to finish with a optimistic note, but I'm sorry I got sidetracked. But I just wanted to highlight that the unbanked people are not necessarily poor people or people who live in developing countries, but even in a country like Australia or even the US for that matter, where when they were trying to help people during the COVID time and they had all these ways of sending money, some people couldn't use those checks. They couldn't cash because they're unbanked. They haven't got bank accounts. At least in Australia, we're lucky. Everyone got a bank account. Unless, as I said, in this case, the banks can also decide to unbank you and close your bank account. I'll stop here. I want to thank you all. My digital footprint is there. The earlier presentations are also available on that link. So I want to thank you again. I want to thank the people who organized this conference.